Pupils at public schools are about a year behind on schooling due to COVID-19. The Economics of Social Policy Research Group at Stellenbosch University has released a study on pandemic-related learning loss at schools. It revealed that this is due to time out of school, lockdowns and rotational timetabling. For more on this, I'm joined now by Ursula Hoadley, Associate Professor at the School of Education at the University of Cape Town. Professor, very good morning. Thanks for speaking to us. Just narrate for us some of these challenges that learners are facing.
Well, we used the Western Cape systemic testing result, the test that they administer on an annual basis, and we looked at the results in 2019 and compared those to the results in 2021. So that was for learners in grade 3, 6 and 9. And we were looking at maths and language. And we identified considerable learning losses across all of those grades in a large sample of learners. The losses that were, they were acute across all of the levels and across the two languages, but losses were far more severe in mathematics, and that's consistent with some of the international studies that are looking at learning losses as a result of COVID. And the losses were also particularly acute at the grade 6 level, and that's the level at which learners transition from usually an African language to the language of teaching and learning, which is English or Afrikaans. So lack of exposure to those languages, the language of learning and teaching, were evident in the losses that learners experienced.
Professor, I understand you using language certainly as a key measurement, because I'd like to think it's fairly simple, but mathematics is, well, certainly for me it was a little bit difficult. How did you come up with mathematics and language as a means of assessment, if you will?
So we were using existing tests that the WCD used to test learners every year. They've been doing that for quite some time. So learners weren't tested in 2020, but they were tested on language and maths in 2019. So we used results from exactly the same test, and we took only those items that were exactly the same in 2019 and 2021, and we compared them. And the reason why the Western Cape test language and maths, and why we are interested in those two subjects, is because those are gateway subjects. In other words, one has to master at the lower levels the skills of reading, writing. You have to learn to count and calculate in order to proceed in any of your schooling and beyond. In other words, those are the gateway to all other learning. So those would be probably the most important subjects to assess when looking at the impact of the pandemic on learning.
Now, to put this in layman's terms, the study suggests that learners missed at least 3/4 of a year of school in the past 2 years, and in some instances considerably more. So it could be as much as a year. So essentially, a learner misses a year of school over 2 years, but still proceeds to the next level. Talk to us about the impact that this will have on the learner.
Yeah, so it does have an enormous impact on the learner, because in terms of the loss of school days and the loss of school time, it was very uneven across different schools, but also within schools. So learners have missed different amounts of content. And one also has to bear in mind that a lost school day doesn't translate directly into lost learning, because learners there's also the issue of forgetting. So learning losses are often more severe than simple number of days lost. But what happened during the pandemic as well is that there was a lot less assessment, and the progression requirements were relaxed to some extent. So you do have a lot more learners progressing to the next grade without necessarily having mastered the content of the previous grade. So, and that has knock-on effects, and those learning losses will also compound as the learner progresses if they're not given the opportunity to catch up. So a learner in grade 3 who hasn't learned to read yet, once they get into grade 4, if they're not given the opportunity to catch up, they're going to fall further and further and further behind. But the impact's not only on learners, the impact's also on teachers, because teachers are trained and they are experienced in teaching the content for their own grade. And so they haven't been given the opportunity or the support to teach content from previous grades. So the impact is large for learners, but also for teachers and what they're having to take on.
So we've obviously explored over the last couple of minutes the huge amount of challenges that this problem has proffered. Now talk to us about the solutions. Do you have or do you see a solution?
So we do in the full report make a number of recommendations, but it's difficult to get around this problem without finding additional time for learning and for providing learners with opportunities to catch up. It's difficult to extend the school day. So one of the suggestions we make is that we need to maximize the time that is available in schooling for instructional purposes. That's always been a little bit lax in our schools. The other thing is that although curriculum trimming, and there has been some done and there's more proposed, goes some way towards alleviating the overload on teachers, we also recommend that the instructional load of other subjects, in other words, the assessments, the tasks, the projects, and some of the time, be alleviated in order to make space for maths and language. These, as I said, are gateway subjects, so we need to perhaps make a bit more room within the existing timetable for those particular subjects. We also suggest, a more instructional role for the education assistants, but we go into more detail on that in the report. But the crucial areas we think are reading in the foundation phase, and some urgency around that, and some mechanisms for catch-up and making time and resources available for making sure that all learners can read in the foundation phase, and that's particularly grade 3 now, who are exiting foundation phase and have had 2 years where they haven't had the grounding in reading skills. And the other area is grade 9 maths, where we found high levels of failure in the tests, and those learners have got less opportunity to catch up before they get to matric. So there's also some urgency around that particular point in learners' schooling careers.